I'm sure everybody's ready. I'm 15 minutes late. I'm so sorry, folks. We had a special visitor from the United Nations that was sort of a last-minute add-on. So anyway, my apologies. I know it takes a lot to get down here and take time out of your day to be here, so I'm deeply sorry for being late. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Jones, San Diego Housing Commission's President and CEO. We really appreciate you taking the time to attend and participate this afternoon in the two public hearings that we're holding today. We really value your perspective, and we welcome and encourage your comments, and we're here to listen today. That is really our role today, is to listen. In a moment, we'll begin with the public hearing about our proposed fiscal year 2025 Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program Administrative Plan. And that will be followed by the public hearing for our proposed fiscal year 2025 Moving to Work Annual Plan. Our Section 8 Administrative Plan contains policies that apply to our largest program, federal rental assistance for households who have low income in the city of San Diego. Our Moving to Work Annual Plan is required because the San Diego Housing Commission has been designated as a Moving to Work agency. This Moving to Work status provides flexibility for us to create innovative housing assistance programs and services for households that we serve in the city of San Diego. Speaker slips are available on the countertop at the side of the room, just inside the door. If you wish to speak about the Section 8 Administrative Plan, please complete a gold speaker slip. You've probably all figured this out already, but I'll just get through it in case you have any questions. If you wish to speak about the Moving to Work Annual Plan, please complete a white paper speaker slip. Please submit your speaker slips to our Vice President of Communications, Scott Marshall. He's over there, standing beside the speaker slips. He will provide them to our presenters so we can call you up to the podium one at a time so you can provide your comments. Members of the public will each have 3 minutes to provide comments. When your name is called, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and begin making your comments. We are also accepting written comments. Details about how to submit those will be provided in today's presentations and are also available on our website. You can visit www.sdhc, that's sdhc.org, and under the About Us menu, you can select the Plans and Policies menu item. Then select either Section 8 Administrative Plan or MTW Annual Plans to go to the web page with the information about how to submit written comments about each of these plans. The comments we receive today and in writing will be taken into consideration as we finalize these two plans. Video of today's public hearing is being streamed live online. The link to watch today's meeting is on the Housing Commission's website at www.sdhc.org on the pages I just mentioned for these plans. We will now begin with the presentation of the Section 8 Administrative Plan, and we will hear public comments after the staff presentation about the plan. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Azucena Valladolid. I'm the Executive Vice President of Rental Assistance and Workforce Development. With me today is Jennifer Kelly, our Director of Housing Choice Voucher Compliance and Quality Assurance. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, requires that all public housing authorities maintain an administrative plan that contains the current policies for its housing choice voucher programs. This year, HUD has required that all public housing authorities gather public input on the mandatory HUD changes that SDHC must implement. Where am I? We could just need new batteries for it. Perfect, thank you. The Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Rental Assistance Program is the Housing Commission's largest program. This slide shows a few details about the program from our fiscal year 2023, which was July 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2023. In fiscal year 2023, the Housing Commission provided rental assistance to more than 17,000 households and dispersed more than $253 million to more than 5,000 participating landlords on behalf of our rental assistance families. The families assisted through the rental assistance programs represent some of the most vulnerable populations in the city of San Diego. Of the families who receive rental assistance, 64% are considered elderly disabled households. The average annual income of all voucher households is $21,709, and the average annual income for our households who are able to work is $34,642 a year. 83% of households assisted are considered extremely low income, which means those families' income is up to 30% of the area median income. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development requires all housing authorities across the country to maintain a board-approved administrative plan that contains the current policies by which governs the Housing Choice Voucher Rental Assistance Programs. The plan must state the agency's policies in those areas where the Public Housing Authority has discretion to establish policy. This year, as mentioned before, HUD has required the agencies to hold a public hearing to gather public comment on the fiscal year 2025 administrative plans, changes regarding the administration of the Housing Choice Voucher Program and special programs. This applies to changes required through the Housing Opportunities Through Modernization Act, or otherwise known as HOPMA. We will be reviewing the significant changes today and asking to take your comments at the end of the presentation. Hand it over to Jennifer.
Good afternoon. HOPMA was enacted in 2016. The final rule implementing HOPMA Section 102, 103, and 104 was officially published in the Federal Register in February of 2023. The final rule revises HOPMA regulations to put them into effect. These sections make changes to the United States Housing Act of 1937 and affect income calculation, income review, and program eligibility. HOPMA was intended to streamline processes and reduce burdens on both housing providers and families. Public housing authorities are required to update their administrative plans to reflect the changes required by HOPMA. This includes requirements to seek public comment, as we are doing today, and Housing Commission Board approval of the administrative plan. The San Diego Housing Commission intends to implement all required HOPMA policies with re-examinations effective January 1st of 2025 per HUD guidelines. I would like to make a note that this date is subject to change as it depends on HUD's adoption of the Housing Information Portal and any further HUD timing requirements. The San Diego Housing Commission is designated as a Moving to Work or MTW agency. Because of that designation and our existing MTW initiatives, many of the HOPMA changes apply only to the traditional Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher programs. The San Diego Housing Commission does not currently administer any vouchers under the traditional Housing Choice Voucher program. However, HUD has directed that the policies for traditional housing choice vouchers must be included in the administrative plan. The proposed fiscal year 2025 Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan does include several HOPMA mandated policies that do affect both MTW and the traditional HCV programs. The child care expense hardship, the net asset limit of $100,000 for program eligibility, safe harbor for income determinations, policy on consent forms, including the revocation of consent, clarification of a policy regarding income calculation errors, and the addition of long-term care premium expenses to the allowable health and medical care expenses. And I'll go into these in a little more detail. For child care expenses, a family whose eligibility for the child care expense deduction, whose eligibility is ending, may request a financial hardship exemption to continue that child care expense deduction. The Housing Commission will recalculate the family's adjusted income and continue the child care deduction. The family must demonstrate to the Housing Commission's satisfaction that the family is unable to pay their rent because of the loss of the child care expense deduction, and that the child care expense is necessary even though the family member is no longer employed or furthering his or her education. The hardship exemption and resulting alternative adjusted income calculation must remain in place for a period of up to 90 days. Additional 90-day extensions may be granted on a case-by-case basis. We will promptly notify the family in writing, either electronically or by mail, of the adjusted income and rent portion based on the approved hardship. and families will be required to report to the Housing Commission if they're within 30 days if if they have any change in circumstances. HUD has implemented through HOTMA a requirement that if a family's total net assets exceed $100,000, the family will not be eligible for the rental assistance program. Also, if the family has a present ownership interest in real property that is suitable for residents and has a legal right to reside in or sell that property, then the family is also not eligible for rental assistance. Our policy on safe harbor. Under HOTMA, HUD requires public housing authorities to clarify in our administrative plan whether they will accept income determinations from other HUD-defined programs. These are identified as federal means-tested programs through a third-party verification known as Safe Harbor. HUD has stated that they are working on establishing information sharing agreements with other federal means-tested programs to facilitate information sharing. Obtaining third-party verification from these programs is currently administratively burdensome, and so the Housing Commission has decided not to move forward with establishing a safe harbor policy at this time. However, when information sharing agreements have been established, the Housing Commission will revisit this item. The consent form policy is a streamlining measure for public housing authorities and for families. Under HOTMA, once the consent form is signed, it does not need to be re-signed each year. Currently, the forms must be re-signed at each biennial recertification. HUD requires the consent forms, which authorizes HUD and public housing authorities to obtain necessary information for verifying program eligibility. The new policy also allows public housing authorities to begin the termination process for a family if the family revokes that consent. The termination process can be halted if the family decides to reverse course and provide that consent. Income calculation errors. When the Housing Commission becomes aware of an income calculation error, including very minor items, the error will be corrected retroactive to the effective date of the action that resulted in the error. This is regardless of the dollar amount associated with that error. Families will not be required to repay the Housing Commission in instances where the Housing Commission miscalculated the income, resulting in a family being undercharged for rent. When the Housing Commission becomes aware of the error, the family will be provided a 30-day notice of the increase to their rent portion. The overpaid amount will be paid to the landlord through a housing assistance payment adjustment with instructions to the landlord to credit the amount toward the family's rent portion until the entire amount is credited toward the family. This is an industry practice as well. The last item on this slide is our long-term care insurance premiums. They have been added as an allowable health and medical care expense. We'll now move on to HOTMA changes that will apply only to traditional housing choice vouchers. Assets will not be considered in the rent portion calculation if they are below $50,000. The previous threshold for traditional housing choice vouchers was $5,000. Dependent allowances, currently $480 per dependent, will be adjusted annually by HUD according to the Consumer Price Index. The elderly disabled allowance, currently $400, will increase to $525 and will also be subject to HUD's also be adjusted annually by HUD according to the Consumer Price Index. There will be a change to the threshold for deducting medical expenses and a new phased-in hardship policy. There will be a general relief hardship policy as related to health and medical care and reasonable attendant care auxiliary apparatus expenses. And there will be change to the interim policy, reporting, and effective dates. Going into a little more detail here, the families reporting assets of less than $50,000 will be able to self-certify their assets are less than $50,000 and they will not be used in the income calculation and will not require third-party verification. Again, previously the HUD threshold was assets under $5,000. And I also wanted to note that retirement accounts and certain other assets are not included as assets according to HUD. Assets exceeding $50,000 will continue to require third-party verification. And again, this is for housing choice voucher, traditional housing choice vouchers only. The allowances and deductions will also be revised. Adjusted income is defined as the annual income minus any HUD allowable expenses and deductions. Under the new HUD-HOTMA rules for the traditional housing choice voucher program, the elderly disabled allowance is increased from $400 to $525. The dependent allowance will remain at $480, and both allowances will be subject to the annual adjustment by HUD according to the Consumer Price Index. These allowances will apply also to our emergency housing voucher and their Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing or VASH voucher programs, but do not apply to the general MTW vouchers. The new statutory rule also stipulates that families in the traditional housing choice voucher program will qualify for a medical expense deduction if the expenses exceed 10% of annual income. HOTMA allows a phased-in hardship exemption under certain circumstances. This is a change from the current statutory threshold, again for traditional housing choice vouchers, which allows deductions for medical expenses exceeding 3% of annual income. This change does not apply to our MTW households, but it does apply to VASH and emergency housing vouchers. The qualifications for a general relief hardship have also been revised. General relief deductions relates to deductions for health and medical care expenses, reasonable attendant care, and auxiliary apparatus expenses. To receive general relief, a family must demonstrate that a family's unreimbursed health and medical expenses or unreimbursed reasonable attendant care and auxiliary apparatus expenses have increased. Or a family must demonstrate that its financial hardship is as a result of a change in circumstances that would not otherwise initiate an interim reexamination. If eligible, the family would receive a deduction for eligible health and medical care expenses exceeding 5% of the annual income for 90 days. Again, to clarify, this change does not apply to our MTW households, but it does apply to the VASH and emergency housing vouchers. Wait, did I go? Oh, yes, sorry. Apologize for that. So this concludes our presentation. A draft of the Section 8 Administrative Plan with HOTMA updates is available on the Housing Commission's website for your review. To access the plan, please visit www.sdhc.org. Again, that's sdhc.org. This is under the About Us menu at the top of the screen. Select Plans and Policies, and then select Section 8 Administrative Plan. Public comment must be on the administrative plan must be received by close of business on March 1st, 2024. We'll take the comments that we received today. You can also, if you later have a comment, or for those of you online, can email us at adminplan@sdhc.org, or you can also write in to Administrative Plan Review / Rental Assistance Division, San Diego Housing Commission, 1122 Broadway, Suite 300, San Diego, California, 92101. Thank you very much. I'd like now to call up our residents who have filled out a speaker request form. So first I'd like to call Shelley Cook.
Good afternoon, everyone. Excuse me. Good afternoon. Yes, I am Shelley Cook. Thank you for having me. Thank you for opening this this space so the public can respond. I'm not quite sure if this is the right space to bring this to attention. This is in regards to my household. Which reflects what's in this administrative plan. So you shared, Miss, about the housing income error, that slide there, and I have a question about that, which is it only in cases when housing underpays their portion, um, where it's considered an income error? And what I mean by that is, if I understood you correctly, you said for the income error on that slide, it's when the housing portion is um, doesn't pay all of its portion to that tenant's rent, and then it's reviewed later on, and the tenant doesn't have it is not obligated to pay that back. Did I hear that correctly?
So this is a little tricky because obviously you have a specific issue that
I
you're
do.
thinking about. Yeah. So because this is a public comment hearing, the amount that we can, this is going to sound really ridiculous. I'm so sorry. The amount that we can just come back with an easy answer question is really limited, and I apologize for that.
That's fine.
But we've taken your information, and
Okay.
if we can make sure that Scott has your information so
Yeah,
that we
that'd be
can
great.
follow up with you
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
directly.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that you spend a lot of time to come down here. We want to get your answer to you.
Sure, that'd be wonderful. Like I said, I didn't know if this was the right space for that kind of feedback.
There's no wrong space. So there's any opportunity to share your concerns, I think, is the right space. But we just kind of have to follow up with you afterwards. That's all.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'll be just fine. Thank you
Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, I'd like now to call Yolanda Melton.
So I had a question, but if it's specific to my case, okay, I'm just gonna say what I
If you are
can do.
comfortable sharing in
Yeah, I'm
public,
just gonna-
that's
so-
perfectly fine.
So my rent goes up every year about $50, but this last year it went up like $300, which Section 8 only pays a limited amount, which doubled my portion to pay. So it kind of caught me off guard, and I just wondered if you could comment on that.
So I can't specifically comment on that because I don't know the particulars of the rent increase request or the, the community you're in from a payment standard perspective. So I apologize for that, but we can follow up with you afterwards, if that's okay, if we can get your information.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to come down.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, is it me again? And so we're
ready for you.
we're moving to the moving to work presentation? Okay. And Scott, if you could just get information. Thank you so much. Thank you all for taking the time to come down. We really appreciate it. We will follow up.
Alrighty, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Saw. I'm a Strategic Programs Manager at the San Diego Housing Commission. This afternoon's workshop, as Lisa mentioned, is going to review the draft fiscal year 2025 Moving to Work Annual Plan. The plan period runs from July 1, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. And before we submit the annual plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, the Housing Commission is required to have our draft plan available for public comment for a minimum of 30 days. And so the draft annual plan is currently available on our website for members of the public to review and provide comments. We're presenting to you today to provide an overview of Moving to Work and the draft annual plan, and again, to provide an opportunity for members of the public to provide us with feedback to take into consideration as we finalize our plan. Can I have?
Serious clicker.
Perfect, thank you. All right. So Moving to Work is a demonstration program for public housing authorities, and it provides us with the opportunity to design innovative, cost-effective strategies that are better suited to meet our local needs. Moving to Work activities have to meet 3 statutory objectives. They're listed on the slide before you, and they are to reduce costs and federal expenditures, help families become more economically self-sufficient. So in San Diego, this is focused on families that are able to work, and improve housing choices for families with low income. In addition, Moving to Work agencies have to assist substantially the same total number of eligible low-income families as would have been served if we did not have our Moving to Work designation. The Housing Commission is one of 39 original Moving to Work, or MTW, agencies out of approximately 3,200 public housing authorities nationwide. Today, 123 agencies have received MTW status either under the original agreement with HUD or through an expansion cohort. This slide before you lists a few examples of how our MTW designation provided us with opportunities to design programs better suited to meet our local needs. Several of the programs in our homelessness initiative, Housing First San Diego, are actually MTW initiatives. These include our Moving Home Rapid Rehousing program, Moving On, Monarch School, and Guardian Scholars Rental Assistance programs. We also implemented locally designed programs like our sponsor-based subsidy program, which pairs rental assistance with supportive services to specifically help people experiencing homelessness. Moving to Work flexibility also enabled the Housing Commission to create the San Diego Housing Commission Achievement Academy to provide opportunities for families to become more financially self-sufficient. The Achievement Academy is available at no cost for individuals and families with low income in the city of San Diego. Programs emphasize career planning, job skills, job placement, and personal financial education such as budgeting and managing credit. We also use our MTW flexibility to create and preserve affordable rental housing. For example, the Housing Commission has invested MTW funds towards acquiring properties such as Village North Senior Garden Apartments and maintaining our existing properties to ensure that they remain in good condition long term. For the fiscal year 2025 Moving to Work annual plan, we are repurposing 2 existing MTW activities and proposing 1 new activity. The first activity we are repurposing is the establishment of reasonable cost limits. This activity relates to creating and preserving affordable housing. This MTW activity allows the Housing Commission to set alternative cost limits for the total development cost, or TDC, and hard construction costs, or HCC, on development and rehabilitation activities that utilize MTW funds. The Housing Commission is repurposing this activity to update the methodology used to determine these alternative cost limits for TDC and HCC. This updated methodology will allow the Housing Commission to increase its ability to ensure that more affordable units are developed or rehabilitated within the City of San Diego, which in turn will increase housing choice for low-income families. The current methodology approved by HUD uses a look-back period of 3 years of all development and rehabilitation projects that utilize Housing Commission funds. The updated methodology will use a look-back period of only 1 year and remove rehabilitation projects from the analysis. Using a look-back period of 3 years includes samples that are no longer relevant to the current environment. Project costs have dramatically and consistently increased year over year. By focusing the look-back period only on the most recent and relevant project data within the last year, the proposed cost limits will be more closely aligned with current market conditions. This better positions the Housing Commission to preserve, acquire, and develop affordable rental housing in the City of San Diego. The first table on this slide includes the cost limits using the proposed methodology of a 1-year look-back period with rehabilitation projects removed. The second table includes cost limits using the methodology previously approved by HUD. As you can see, the cost limits on the first table are higher and more closely reflects the current market conditions in the city.
The second activity, the Housing Commission. You already had me, thank you. The second activity the Housing Commission is reproposing is its Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing, or VASH voucher program. The HUD VASH program combines Housing Choice Voucher rental assistance for veterans experiencing homelessness with case management and clinical services provided by the Department of Veteran Affairs. The Housing Commission received approval in fiscal year 2013 to use its MTW flexibilities to implement policies to ease administration and provide benefits to VASH participants. Some examples of MTW flexibilities include a biannual inspection, a biannual recertification cycle, and a 12-month reprieve of income garnishments if requested by the applicant. Minimum rents for VASH participants are set at 0 for the first 12 months of the program participation as a policy exception. After the first 12 months, minimum rents are set at $50. The Housing Commission is reproposing this activity to set minimum rents at 0 for the duration of the participants' time in the program. All other aspects of how a tenant's rent portion is calculated will remain the same. The VA used to use grants or other programs to help veterans with their minimum rent. However, these programs are no longer available. This update will help veterans on the VASH program to remain stably housed in cases where they are unable to secure income in a timely manner. Currently, about 4% of all VASH households are currently subject to a minimum rent. This update will assist these households who have zero income and are unable to pay the $50 minimum rent. The Housing Commission is proposing a new activity in this year's MTW plan to modify the regulatory definition of rent reasonableness to foster housing stability for rental assistance households. Rent reasonableness ensures the contract rents for units rented by Housing Choice Voucher participants are comparable to similar market rate units. This activity will modify the regulatory definition of rent reasonableness to limit Housing Choice Voucher rent increases to the lower of 5% plus the Consumer Price Index, or 10% within a 12-month period. By limiting the rent increases to a reasonableness percentage in this manner, the Housing Commission will approve rent increases according to the rent increase trends for similar unassisted units in the rental market industry. This activity will further enhance Housing Choice Voucher households' ability to maintain stability in their housing and may prevent terminations or evictions and facilitate a more constant and predictable rent. This activity will foster an environment where landlords implement measured and incremental rent increases rather than sudden and significant increases. The policies and procedures related to this activity will be detailed in the Housing Commission's Section 8 Administrative Plan, which will come before our board again before summer. This will include the ability for a landlord to appeal if this activity would create a hardship for that landlord. This concludes our presentation on the proposed fiscal year 25 MTW plan. Any clues about where they can submit comments?
Scott, I don't think we got any speaker slips. Alrighty.
Well, that was very quiet. Once again, we want to thank you for taking the time to come down here today. We appreciate that this is an important part of our public process, hearing feedback from participants and community members about the plans that we're proposing for approval to our board and to HUD. So we really thank you for your time. And again, my apologies that we started late.